Ilia Topuria, should he be stripped? So I had visited on the MMA Hour with Ariel Hawani, and I had shared this opinion. Ariel took that segment, my opinion, and he put it out on social media, and it did very well. It created some real conversation amongst you guys. My phone started ringing. My own social media started to light up on this topic. And I would like to clarify just a little bit, because if you just read the words that I said, they sounded pretty harsh and they sounded against Ilia. And I'll just share for you that that's not what's in my heart. I'm very much on Ilia's side of this. I very much want Ilia to come out on top. I don't like what he's going through, and I don't like the idea that he then be punished on top of having to deal with something that's bringing him great anguish and stress. But we don't control this business with heart. We control it with precedence. And in this sport that is still forming, we fiercely adhere to the rules that we make up on the spot. So there's nothing that says that we can't leave that belt on Ilia, that we can't have compassion. There's nothing that says, look, we're not going to do that to our audience. And the UFC would be doing something to the audience. If the UFC, just hear me out, but if they were to strip Ilia and they were to have an undisputed champion, they're going to put a champion out there in front of the world that they in their hearts don't believe is the right guy. And that ethically is very responsible of the UFC to not do that. That they believe that Ilia is the right guy. Now, we've seen that Ilia is the right guy. We've seen that he's the best in the world. Ilia Topuria, if it were not for paperwork, based fully on competition, wins that he had at the time that he had them, paperwork and paper alone stopped Ilia Topuria from being a simultaneous featherweight, lightweight, and BMF champion. Paperwork is the only thing that kept that man from having 3 belts. So in the world, if you were going to strip him, you would not just be stripping him, right? If he had what he should have, or at least what he could have had, and that paperwork matters. I've beaten world champions myself, but you got to beat them the night they have the world championship. You can't beat them a different night. Like, that's just the way it is. I get it, but I'm just sharing. You could be stripping a 2-division and BMF champion all in one swoop. So for the UFC to look at the rankings, of which Ilia is number 2. Now, he was number 1 and became number 2 without ever losing a fight. Ilia was ranked in front of John Jones, in front of Islam Makhachev, in front of Pantoja, in front of Kayla Harrison. He was ranked number 1. Did not lose and became number 2. But either way, I'm sharing with you. He's the champion of his division. He's the number 2 according to the rankings. Period. Fighter in the world. So if you were to strip him, just so you could move on and get that belt around somebody else, you would be putting that belt around somebody and showing your audience a person that you didn't truly feel was the champion. Okay. Now, right? That's one side of it. Is that reason to not strip a guy? Is that a reason that you could articulate? Is that a reason? No, we don't write these things down. We adhere to them and we look at each situation as we go. But at some point in time, enough time will have gone by, enough situations will arise where we do write it down. That is precisely where the rankings came from. For example, Joe Silva used to have rankings. You go to a meeting with Joe Silva, he'd get out and he'd have rankings. But he wrote them. They were his rankings. It was 2012 when the first rankings came about, and they were top 10. Now they go all the way to 15. I have no idea why. But the point is, eventually you do start to write things down. They start to become official. So how would you write that down? how would you write down that you're not going to strip a guy if he's ranked high enough and has demonstrated he's good enough, and you don't truly believe there's somebody in the roster that should have the very belt that he is not defending? How do you do that? And the other side of the coin is this is a volunteer army and always has been. It's never just been about who the best is. It's about who raises their hand and says they want an opportunity to show that they're the best. That is criteria number one and has been since 1993. So if you have somebody, regardless of how talented they are, Khabib says, I'm done. We knew that Khabib could beat everybody on the roster, but what can we do? He says he's not going to fight. We have to take the belt back. George St. Pierre says, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. Hey, George, you're the best in 2 different weight classes, but if you say you're not going to do it anymore, we have to take the belt back. I get that Ilia hasn't said that, but the interim championship exists for divisions. That in the absence of the champion, we need something right in the interim. In the meanwhile, in the time between, this is the guy. So to do the interim belt is very appropriate, but when you're not dealing with an illness or an injury, and Ilia is not. No, we don't fully know what he is dealing with, and we've heard the rumors, but I'm just sure you got to set that aside. It absolutely would not matter what he's dealing with if it doesn't go in the bucket of illness or injury. If it doesn't go into one of those 2 buckets, you would then have a champion that's refusing to defend, no matter how good the excuse. And that is the very reason that you would strip, I think. I think. Does that sound right to you guys? It's not nice. And it's not the way I hope it goes. I just want to be able to articulate an argument against it. And I can't. I don't have it. So get some conversation going. This is not an open and closed statement from Professor Chael. This is a conversation. This is one I want to have. I want to be wrong. I want my mind changed. I want Ilia to remain the undisputed champion. I do not want Ilia to be stripped. But Ilia said he should be. And Ilia didn't use the word stripped, but Ilia flat out. Ilia was a man about this. He was every bit the man that Khabib and St. Pierre were when they gave the belt back and said, I'm not going to hold up a division. And it's Ilia's second time doing it. He did it at featherweight, and he gave that back. He said, I'm not going to weigh that again. Let somebody else have their dream. And Ilia tried to do it here. He didn't use the word strip me, but he said they're going to make some announcements. I'm not coming back. He did everything that he could to let the undisputed title be contested. Tell me why it shouldn't be. Is it just because he's so good? Is it just because we have a belief that he's going to come back? Because he hasn't said that. Ilia hasn't said a lot on this, but one of the things that he did not say, he didn't say I'm coming back in the second half. I'll come back somewhere in 2026. He didn't say that. He said, I'm not coming back in the first quarter, which may lead you to believe he's going to come back in the second quarter. I'm just sharing with you, he didn't say that. So if we get to the second quarter, if we get to the third quarter, right, at some point, we take the belt back. But nothing between now and that time needs to change. It's not as though he has to produce a certain doctor statement or a certain letter or a certain x-ray. if he is doing the exact same thing at some point in the future that he's doing now. So with no change, we're going to have to take the belt back. So what is your justification for waiting? What is the argument? Why do we not have to take it back now?